Hello and welcome to the third installment of my Paint.net training class. We'll be talking about an all-important thing today called layers. Remember, there are 4 foundational pieces: tools, colors, layers, and effects. We've already gone through tools and colors, so layers it is today. Now, what is a layer? Well, simply a layer is a level in a drawing. If you can think about if you were to draw something on a piece of paper, then take a piece of transparent tracing paper, put it over the top, draw something else, and then move that object that you drew around over the top of the original drawing, you wouldn't disturb the first drawing, but you would be able to reposition whatever that tracing paper object is exactly how you wanted it, again, without disturbing that picture. So that's kind of one of the main reasons why we use layers. So let me show you what I'm talking about. As you can see here, this is my layer control. Now, if you don't know where that is, it's up here on the upper right-hand side. You hit layers, and there it goes, and it opens. These are my various layers that I have available to me. Right now, we're viewing just the background. If I want to view a layer, I check this box. So you can see the background is a white empty space. That's why we're seeing a white empty space here. If I wanted to change the color of my background, I could just put the fill in and make it orange or whatever, but I'm going to keep it white now just because that's the default and that's how it always starts, okay? Looking at, for example, a picture, okay, and this is what we're talking about. Here's a very simple, terrible sketch of a farm, a barn out in a field, I guess, right? Now, let's say I look at this and I say, well, okay, I like the drawing the way it was, but you know what? I actually want to move this barn over here. So how do I do that? Well, I can first make sure that layer is selected. So this is layer 4, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my selection tool and I'm going to select it. Okay, then I'm going to take my move tool and I'm going to try and move it. Watch what happens though. See? You get this gap, it doesn't line up, it doesn't look right, it's a mess, okay? Now, I can say, well, that's not gonna work. Maybe what I'll do instead is try to lasso this thing, right? So now I gotta sit here and kind of work my way around it. I mean, I'm doing a very rough job here, but just to give you, this is just for purposes of the demonstration. And now I move this, and you see, I still have that similar problem. I mean, it looks a little bit better. I can probably work and fill this in if I wanted to, but it's still kind of a mess. Well, the reality is I didn't draw all this at once. Instead, I drew a background, then I drew a barn on top of that background. So if instead of doing it all in one, if instead I said, okay, there's my background that I drew, and let me get rid of this barn outline, okay, and I'm about to draw the barn, but instead of drawing a barn on top of this, I create a new layer, right, where I hit create new layer. Okay, now I got this empty layer. Now I draw a barn. Okay, what I end up with is, and I'm going to get rid of this layer because we don't need it. This layer 6 is actually where the barn is. Okay, now I've got the same picture, the same image, except there are 2 layers. You've got the background layer with the grass and the sky, and you've got the foreground layer with this barn in it. Okay. So now, when I select the barn and I say, okay, I want to move the barn over, I can do it. And I can reposition it any way I like. So maybe this barn is kind of going down the hill a little bit, see? Doesn't matter. The point is, I'm able to manipulate objects in my pictures without destroying my pictures. So anytime you have something where you're not quite sure where it's going to go, or maybe you've got another object in the picture that's going to interact with that first object, it's always a great idea, very important, probably critical, I would say, that you break that into different layers so that you don't get stuck with this problem of not being able to fix your picture, basically. Okay? So that's all fine and good. Now, some of the other key features about layers, I mean, you just saw me working here. I've got this layer, which is the one that I showed you. But let's say that I just take this barn out. Now I take my background layer, which is this layer 5. This wrench, okay, what this will do is this will allow you to change the name. So I'm going to call this field, okay, and I'm going to call this layer barn, okay. So now I know that what they are, right? And now I have the barn and the field. Okay, good enough. If I want to add a layer, I click this. Now, whatever layer I've got selected up here, it will add a layer on top of that layer, okay? This will delete whatever layer I have selected, okay? This will duplicate a layer. So let's say, for example, I like this, but I want to have this, this image, but I want to have it as just one picture. What I can do is I can duplicate the barn, duplicate the field, and now I can take this barn, and I can use this command here, which is merge down, and merge this barn into this field. Now it's called field, but we're going to change it. We're going to call it complete, we'll call it barn in field. Okay? There you go. So it's actually the compilation of these two. That's what the combination does. Again, be careful with this, because this is precisely the problem we had over here with this original one, right? We merged this down too early, which meant that our barn was now permanently attached in this position to this background. So just be careful with that. You can move your layers up and down. So let's say, for example, I want to put, this barn here, right? So now you got two barns. I want to move it down so it's together with its friend down here, right? I don't need this. Let's say that, right? So to move it down, I just grab it, pull it up and down like that. I can also use these controls here. And lastly, the wrench is what allows me to change the name. Okay, so that's the basic mechanics of moving objects around, as well as the basic mechanics of how the layer box works, okay? Now, there are a few pointers here and there that I would make sure you understand. Understand the difference between a layer that is visible, meaning you can click it and see it, okay, versus a layer that you're actually selected. So right now, I can see this layer, clicked it on, but now I can actually draw on it because I've actually selected it. So just be aware that there's the selection of the layer itself and the box check for visibility, okay? Two different things. Now, let's talk about, we'll back it up a little bit here, talk about why this is important in terms of adding textures to something, all right? So, to do that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna draw a simple shape, all right? So we're on the background layer. We're gonna take this background layer and I'm gonna move it up all the way to the top because I want that to be my starting point again. And I'm gonna add a layer. Now I've got this empty layer, layer 8, and it's being blocked. All this other stuff is now blocked because the background takes precedence over all of it. And this big white square is covering everything up. So we can work with a nice clean background while I show you this. Okay, so take our rectangle and I'm gonna show you, it's white, so we're gonna make this black. Okay, there we go. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna draw a simple piece of wood, okay? Wood is something that has a rich texture. There are obviously lots of little nooks and crannies and things that when you look at wood grain, so you wouldn't be able just to draw a piece of wood very easily, very readily. I'm gonna show you a technique using layers that actually makes the wood look, pretty good, for lack of a better term. So, first step is we draw a shape in a new layer, okay? I'm not drawing a square in the background layer. I've added this layer, okay? Now I'm gonna take this magic wand and I'm gonna select the inside of this thing, okay? Now, this is the key. I am not going to deselect anything, okay? What I'm gonna do instead is I'm gonna save this as my guide shape and I'm gonna add another layer, okay? Now, if we take layer 8 away, it doesn't matter. I still have this shape saved, okay? And if I need to go back, I can always go back and reselect layer 8 to get that shape back. But now I'm on layer 9. I've selected layer 9. I'm looking at layer 9. What I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna take my fill on layer 9 and I'm gonna take brown. Fill this with brown, okay? So I'm gonna take my pencil, or my paintbrush rather, and remember the color tutorial, okay? I'm gonna start with my color, and I'm gonna move this down and make it darker. Right about there, okay? And I'm gonna make some streaks, okay? Wavy lines. Try not to crisscross over your wavy lines. Just keep them like this, okay? And you you do like this. They don't have to be exactly perfect. In fact, you don't want them exactly parallel to each other. You want them to kind of undulate, so it creates this sort of texture like that. Okay? Then you're going to take the cursor and move it the other way. Now you're going to go light. Now in this case, you might want to shrink it. Okay? And now you're going to draw lines in between like this. They don't have to be perfect. You want to try not to crisscross. I mean, I just did right there, but it should be okay. Right? And you're going to want to, just like this, make these lines like that. Okay? Simple as that. Now, there you go. Okay, that's a pretty good start. Now remember, you have all kinds of different colors in the wood grain. You're going to have all kinds of shadows. You're going to have all kinds of little splintering marks and things that you're going to have to build into this. So the problem is, if I'm going to do, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to blend this to make it kind of come together. But watch what happens. See? Now I get that nice, consistent, sort of wavy wood grain look. But there's missing something. Something's missing here. And that is the texture of the wood. Now I can't blend all of this together and blend the texture into it at the same time. That's impossible. So I have to build separate layers. Now, there's another problem. If you notice, when you look at this thing, okay, notice the edges are faded out. Why? Because as this thing mixes color together, those edges don't have anything to, they're sort of empty on one side, so they tend to get faded out. So the way to do that, to fix that, is you go to layer 9. Now remember, layer 9 is just a color square. There's no box. The box is in layer 8, see? Okay, so go to layer 9, and we're going to duplicate it. What is that going to do? That's going to reinforce those edges and make that color stronger. More opaque, less transparent. Watch. Boom. We'll do it one more time. Okay, maybe another time for good measure. Okay, now we've got a whole bunch of duplicates of layer 9, but you see how that's all gone away pretty much? I mean, there's a little bit here and there, but for the most part, you've eliminated that faded edge. Okay, so now we're going to take that and we're going to go to the merge down. We're going to merge that all the way down. There you go. Okay, now we want to add some texture. Okay, we want to add some character to this wood, because right now we've got this kind of fuzzy looking thing that, I mean, it kind of looks like wood, but there's so much more to the character of wood than just this. So we're going to do the add layer. Now we've got layer 10. Now we're going to zoom in a little bit, and what we're going to do now is we're going to take this pencil, we're going to make it smaller, probably 1, okay, and we're going to take this color that we're using and we're going to bring it all the way down. Now you remember, I mean, you can use all these different variants of color, but if you want this to look realistic like wood, you have to stay with one single wood color and then just darken it. It works so much better, okay? And what we're going to do here is we're going to create lines that sort of flow along these channels that we've already created in the wood, right? These are these really kind of, you want to try and give it that sort of elder look, the elder birch kind of thing going on here, right? So there you go. Now, this takes a little bit while, this takes a little patience, I understand, but it will come out looking so much better if you do it this way, okay? So, you can also add in certain other aspects of it too, like, so for example, when you've got knotty looking wood, you can do certain little things, like, for example, you can go like this, do like that, all these little things like that you can add, just sort of, it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, one of the nice things about doing wood is the fact that because it's such an imperfect, the lines are so crazy, the grains on wood is so naturally, it's pleasing to look at, because part of the thing is it sort of flows, but it doesn't have a specific set structure. It's really nice. So again, that relieves a lot of the stress of having to get it exactly right. You don't need perfect lines. You just want it to kind of flow, right? Now what you're going to do is you're going to go back, and again, I know this is effects. This is something that we'll learn later, but again, for the purposes of this exercise, we're only going to use this, just briefly. So now we're going to go here. We're going to go to blur. Okay, now you'll notice that's too much. We're going to take it down a notch. We're going to start from 0 and work our way up. Okay, good. All right. Now we've got some good texture. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add one more. And now we're going to do shading. Now, think of this. There's no way I could have possibly done the color and the wood grain and the shading all on top of them in the same level, on the same layer, and done that blur to make it look like this without it completely messing up. Okay? Here's the other thing. Once you get that one level right, if you mess up the second part or the third part of the subsequent layers, you can just erase the layer and start over again without losing the entire picture. So it's very nice. Okay, so in this one, what we're going to do is we're going to do some shading. Okay, so we're going to take this down to almost black, just a little bit down here. Okay, remember this is your color bar, right? You're making this almost black, and you're going to bring the opacity down to, I don't know, let's say about here. Remember, we're going to be able to do some shade work, some blending. That's also gonna help with the opacity. So just be aware of that. It doesn't have to be, okay? Now, what we're gonna do now is we're gonna look for parts of the wood where we think there should be shade, right? So inside here, this looks like this. This looks like it could be shaded here, right? And then you're gonna go here, like that. Just find little areas where it looks like there should be some shade. There should be some shadow. Okay. And just soft like that. Okay. Like that. All right. Now, then we're going to come down here. All right, we're going to come up here and we're going to change this brush to a smaller size, slightly smaller. Maybe a little less than that even. We're going to zoom in. Okay. And we're going to take this brush back here and we're going to add some stronger shades. So when you use opaque colors, or when you use translucent colors that don't have much opacity, I should say, when you go back over them, they will strengthen themselves. So watch what happens. See, it's the exact same here as it is next to there. But the minute I cross over, see, it gets darker again. So just be aware of that you want to have it be that way. So, when you think about looking at this photo here, this part's probably darker, right? So you want the darker parts in the middle. Don't worry if there's a line, if it doesn't look like it's blended. That's what we'll take care of that later on. Okay, so that doesn't have to be perfect, but now we've got some pretty good shading, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go layer 11, and we're going to do a blur, and this is going to be a little bit more of a powerful blur than before. Okay, like that. Okay, so layer 8 is the border of the square. Layer 9 is the base color of the wood. Layer 10 is the grain, and layer 11 is the shading. So now I know, I can keep track of everything for you. So first we made a border, then we filled it with wood color. We made a base color, we're using different shades of the same color. We then added grain using a darker shade with a smaller pencil of that same color. And then we did shading, using an almost black variant of that same color with low opacity. And what we came up with was basically a fairly rich, or a much richer, image of wood. You can use it for cloth. Kind of looks like cloth in a certain way too, I guess. But nonetheless, you can't do this in a single layer. You need multiple layers to make this. Okay, so now we're done. We can take our merge layer down function. Shading becomes grain, grain becomes base color becomes border. We'll rename border because it's all connected now. We'll just call it wood. There you go. So I hope this has been helpful, but now you can see Layers are super important. Number one, if you want to move an object around a picture. Number two, if you want to add to the complexity of that image. It's absolutely critical that you know how to use layers.